Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's reception. My name is Chris Kalbeck. I'm the AVP of Finance and Admin at the University of New Brunswick, and it's my honor to be your MC this evening. And first, I'd like to thank our musicians, our Dalhousie students. It was Justin Metcalf on guitar, Jackson Fairfax Perry on sax, and Alex Arnold on bass. So thank you very much. Our host for this evening's reception is David Bernard, our chair of the CRKN board and president and vice chancellor of the University of Manitoba. We also have some honored guests with us this evening. Ron and Shirley Bond. If Ron and Shirley are here. And Kathy McDonald. Kathy, there she is. And Guy Levesque from CFI. As we know, the foundations of collaborations are the people. Those who commit themselves to the mission of our organizations and who go the second mile not only to accomplish important objectives, but also to inspire and lead others. Tonight, we are honoring and thanking a member of CRKN's community who truly embodies these characteristics and commitment and leadership. We celebrate these qualities and generosity of leadership through the awarding of CRKN's Ron McDonald Distinguished Service Award. The Ron McDonald Distinguished Service Award recognizes outstanding leadership in building collaboration, serving our community, and advancing our organization's goals. This award is named in memory of Ron McDonald, who was the CEO of Inter-University Services, Inc., a collaboration of Nova Scotia and Atlantic universities whose offices are here in Halifax. Ron was one of the original members of CRKN's negotiations research team, joining us in February 2000 and one of its longest serving and most committed participants. I personally knew Ron, and he was an outstanding individual. And it's wonderful to have Kathy with us this evening. So thank you, Kathy, for joining us. And now it's my privilege to announce that the 2012 recipient of the Ron McDonald Distinguished Service Award is Ron Bond. I'd like to now call on David Bernard to say a few words.
The spiritual leader, Donald Walters, said, "Leadership is an opportunity to serve. It's not a trumpet call to self-importance." And we're here tonight to honor that kind of leadership. Ron Bond is a scholar and an administrator who has a reputation, I think, in Canada, both for his scholarship and for his work as provost at the University of Calgary, that would warrant awards in their own right. But he has also made a substantial contribution to this organization and the associated activities that swirl around it. He was involved with the Canadian National Site Licensing Project and eventually with the Canadian Research Knowledge Network. He's played almost every role that anybody but a librarian is allowed to play in this organization. He's been a member of the board, he's been a member of the executive committee, he's been chair of the advisory board, he was a member of the governance committee, he was a member of the Vital Task Force. I don't think there's anything else you could have done, actually. Go back to library school. The people who talk about Ron talk about him in really wonderful terms. They use words like an open style, inclusiveness, wisdom, insight, sincerity, diplomacy, and collaboration. And I think all of us, based on our own individual experience working with Ron, can say that those things are definitely true, not only of his work here at CRKN, but of his work more generally. Most people that I know that have worked with Ron think of him not just as a colleague, but as a friend, and really as an example of what the best of what the university, the academy strives for in leaders. He's a statesman, he's a gentle person and a scholar, and it's fitting that he be honored tonight, I think, with an award named for Ron McDonald, who also exemplified many of these characteristics. As I said in the formal note that announced Ron's winning of the award, Ron's understanding of the needs and perspectives of diverse stakeholders and his experience in organizational development have earned him a well-deserved reputation as a bridge builder, diplomat, mentor, and role model. I'd like to share with you one of my favorite poems. It's entitled "Those We Follow" by the contemporary Irish poet Micheál O'Shiel. The best said little, yet enough to signal praise. The best said least, never laid too heavy a hand, just a glance of light, a path I might find. But I followed false signs, stumbled into byways. At last I retrace, begin the hall again, the double task that probes the double faith of loss before gain. And then a patient glow of progress. I so wanted them to know, to call to them, oh, look what I've done. But they've gone beyond the bend and out of sight. I sway an instant, peering ahead. A voice resonates. Steady as you go, you carry someone's beacon. I like that poem and the picture it paints of people who've gone before us and have been examples to us. And then the recognition of the responsibility that we each carry to learn from those examples, to be beacons for others who come behind us. And it just seems to me entirely appropriate to recognize Ron Bond, because Ron has been someone who has made contributions that many of us love to emulate, and it's appropriate to say it now and not to wait until it's too late. It's appropriate to say thank you. Thank you for a wonderful contribution.
Well, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to say a few words that quite honestly will express my delight that the recipient of the Ron McDonald Award this year is Ron Bond. This is an important award, not only because it honors distinguished service, but because it has the gravitas and sense of commitment reflecting from the person after whom the award was named, Ron McDonald. I personally didn't know Ron, although our paths were remarkably close, both geographically and in being part of CNSLP and CRKN. However, if you measure a person by the impact they've had on the community they serve and the colleagues they've worked with, he was truly an exceptional individual, and this adds so much to the significance of the award. I've known Ron Bond since he joined the board of CRKN, as I did in 2005. It surprised me after a few months to find out that his academic expertise was in literature and music. For those who may not be aware of the details, Ron has a PhD in Renaissance English literature from the University of Toronto and an associateship in piano from the Royal Conservatory of Music, amongst many other credentials. From my background, I'm more used to such folks having long flowing hair and a stooping posture from poring over the pages and caressing the keyboard. Not an upstanding fellow from the oil patch whose voice booms over an audience and echoes off the walls. Now, I did hear a hint last night that at one point Ron's hair may have been longer. If there are any pictures, please send them to jonathan.blayett@uwaterloo.ca. One of the delights for me working with CRKN has been learning about other worlds and fields of study. And I now pride myself that I know at least 30% of the acronyms used by librarians. And I have a good estimate of the alcohol capacity of about the same proportion of chief librarians in Canada. I also have some appreciation for the study methods and infrastructure needs of colleagues in the humanities and in the social sciences. I've learnt a lot through interacting with CRKN, but many things are still a mystery to me. We're moving into a world where boundaries are dissolving between disciplines, between geographic areas, and between physical and virtual environments. Our success in moving forward depends very much on having an intuitive understanding of these mergers and the ability to broker change when communities must let go of long-held habits. In Ron Bond, I think we have someone who has that intuition and ability, and this is why he has enabled such substantial progress for CRKN through his membership of the board and chairing of the External Advisory Board. Now, it is noticeable that most of the time when Ron begins to speak, other conversation ceases. There are exceptions to this rule, and you know who you are. But when it happens, I think there are two reasons for this sudden silence. One is the knowledge that if patient, the hearer will be bathed in a mellifluous cascade of eloquent phraseology, delivered in that pleasant baritone that drops everyone's blood pressure by at least 10 notches. I've only known one other person for whom I would sit back and enjoy the sentence structure and intonation, someone who now leads a certain national organisation. The difference is that Ron is also concise. The second reason it's worth shutting up and listening is that what Ron has to say usually hits the nail on the head like an Estwing 16-ounce claw hammer. I could not tell you how many times I remember sitting at a conversation at the board or committee that was trying to find the right place to land. But at the table you could see that the Bondian thoughts were simmering and gradually moving into place, and then with absolute diplomacy Ron would gently make his suggestion, and the boat was in the harbour, the peg was in the ground, and we could move on. Ron has many talents in his approach and style that come together to make a contribution that is outstandingly effective, efficient, and efficacious. I think there can be no one more deserving of an award, which is given for significant and sustained contributions to the development of partnerships and the building of research infrastructure and capacity in Canadian universities. Really, that describes Ron better than I could possibly hope to do. A very deserving recipient of this year's Ron MacDonald Distinguished Service Award. Ron Bond.
Thank you, Jonathan and David. And now I would like to ask David to present Ron with this award and to extend to him our entire community's thanks for his outstanding leadership in building research infrastructure in Canada over the last decade.
Here we go. That there.
Well, first of all, thanks to David and Jonathan and the folks who nominated me, and thanks to David Bernard, one of three presidents I've had the pleasure of working with during my time with CRKN. My remarks, and Jonathan, I guess, has told me they have to be both mellifluous and concise. My remarks will be brief, since there's no one here, I suspect, who believes that shorter isn't better for speeches, especially speeches given at receptions. So I want to begin by paying tribute first to Ron MacDonald, a member of the key CRKN committee. The negotiations resource team, as I have always said, is really the heart and soul of CRKN, and as a member of that group from 2000 to 2007, Ron clearly made very distinguished contributions to the success of the CRKN. I also want to say that it's been a pleasure tonight to meet, albeit briefly, Kathy, and to have the chance to talk with her a little bit. And I want to acknowledge as well the presence here of my wife, Shirley, who traveled on the red eye from Calgary, where there was snow, to be here and to enjoy the fine weather that you've rolled out for us in Halifax. I think it's appropriate to mention Ron's partner and my partner in a context of an award that celebrates Ron McDonald's commitment to collaboration and partnerships. And certainly I'm pleased to be the recipient of an award that honors that sort of commitment. I will say that I greeted the news that I would be receiving this award with a mixture of surprise, pride, and pleasure. And it really is humbling to be in the presence of my forerunners as recipients of this award, Jean-Pierre Côté, with whom I had the great pleasure of working for some time as a member of the CRKN board, and the aforementioned Jonathan Blais, who was already before you. And these are people who strike me as being typical of the many people who work for and with the CRKN. As far as I'm concerned, it's all about human infrastructure, human resources, human capacity, human beings, or as I would prefer to say, people. And I want to evoke here as well, knowing that many of you in the room will have known him, the memory of Alan MacDonald, a visionary from Halifax, with whom I worked closely when I was at the University of Calgary. And AHM, as some of us call him, would say, if he were here, that he is no relation of Ron MacDonald, or of Joe MacDonald, a prominent lawyer in this city. And Alan might even admit that the bridge from Dartmouth is probably not named after him. From what I know, Ron MacDonald, like Alan MacDonald, never forgot the importance of people in organizations. I want to share this award with all the people on the board, but I want to share it particularly with members of the advisory board with whom I had the pleasure of working. Many of them professional librarians, but people from other vocations as well. We had the chief geologist of Canada working with us. He wasn't ever quite sure why, but he was a valuable contributor. We had two senior public servants who were intimately familiar with the government's innovation agenda, as it was called at that time. Folks from SISTE and from both American and British libraries, copyright experts, the head of the Vancouver Public System, and of course some remarkable researchers, some of them Canada Research Chairs, the end users of the digital products to which the CRKN and similar entities have provided access. And all of these people, those I've named and those I haven't, coming from diverse backgrounds as they did, modeled mutually respectful collaborative commitment to a common cause. The scale and scope of the CRKN really is remarkable. Librarians love consortia and belong promiscuously to many of them. But I regard this as the ultimate Canadian consortium, more ambitious and daring than any other. It's also more challenging than others, and it yields more opportunities, I think, for growth, evolution, and maturation than others. I regard the CRKN as a particularly Canadian exercise, or attempted exercise, in nation building. An exercise that is obliged to recognize the differences in size, scope, and mandates of the research libraries that belong to it, and is also obliged to recognize regional and linguistic diversity. Not to mention a host of time zones. Not to mention different attitudes to GST, or is it HST? And we spent a huge amount of time on the board trying to sort out GST and HST issues. Believe me, that was the least engaging part of the exercise. And on my list of things not to mention, this is a rhetorical ploy that some of you will recognize as occupatio. I'll also mention the fact that CRKN contains within its membership different attitudes in different parts of the country toward something centered in Ottawa. As far as I'm concerned, the CRKN is the membership. The board and the secretariat work for the members. And collectively, we have an exciting and challenging future as we deal with the evolving role of libraries and librarians, with the brave new world of MOOCs and emerging digital cultures, and I put that in the plural, and what my friend Mike Ridley is going to call in his E-something, as he's told me it's going to be marketed as, a book called Beyond Literacy. That's what he's referring to when he thinks about the emerging culture that he's going to be writing about. My own contribution to the fancy jargon is that I have taken to thinking of the CRKN, and I say this particularly for the benefit of the CFI, as represented here tonight by Guy. I've taken the thinking of the CRKN as a form of augmented academic reality. The onus on the organization now, I think, is to reevaluate and recalibrate the relationships between and among members of various kinds, to refashion the value propositions of CRKN, and to reconsider the nature of the deal struck with the vendors. This morning's workshop and also many others that are occurring over these couple of days are supplying many exciting ideas, I think, on how CRKN might refashion itself. I think it's axiomatic that change is the only constant. And I must say that I was struck by the irony of the photograph of me that is found in the announcement of this award. There I am in front of a row of books as someone who has worked to broaden access to digital resources. Look more closely, and the irony, and I'm not even sure if that's the right word, the irony becomes more pointed. Several of the books in the background focus on the work of Edmund Spenser, somebody I've published on. And in various works, but particularly in the Mutability Cantos, published in 1609, Spenser writes eloquently about the truism that change is the only constant. Fortunately, he doesn't use the phrase, the new normal. But as a civil servant, as well as a poet, he might have done that were he writing now over 4 centuries later. I began by paying tribute to Ron MacDonald, and I want to pay tribute as well to the staff of CRKN, especially Deb